This is lesson 5 of A Witch's Primer, and this lesson is about the spirit world. Working with spirits and in the spirit world is a significant part of the craft. And today we're going to discuss fundamental concepts about the spirit world and different types of spirits. The mortal world is the visible world that we perceive with our physical senses. But there's an invisible world that exists beyond our physical perceptions. Understanding and experience, we are all spirits. We already exist in the spirit world while having physical bodies. And having both the physicality and the spirituality allows us to learn a lot. There's so much more that's going on beyond what our physical senses perceive. And many witches, including myself, recognize and incorporate various interactions with this world in our practice to achieve our desires. There are many different levels of existence in the spirit world, similar to the various different levels of development in the physical world. These levels contain distinct sentient beings with their distinct forms of communication, bodies, and abilities. And we all possess multiple bodies. All of us do. Not just our physical bodies, but we all have many different types of bodies. And we're going to explore different bodies later and how to develop those bodies. But it's important to understand that the physical form is not the only existence. Many people fear the spirit world because it's something that they don't understand since it's not perceived by the physical senses. And this lack of understanding, lack of education, and lack of direct experience contribute to this fear, as does the unknown nature of what lies beyond death. Unfortunately, different religious systems have irresponsibly handled spirit-related matters, leading to negligence and ignorance. Acknowledging our connection to the spirit world is crucial despite these common fears. And these common fears are usually fears of ghosts or demons and possessions and astral travel, things like that. Such fears are often unfounded. The spirit world contains different types of beings, some helpful and some not. Learning to interact with spirits responsibly requires maintaining a purity of purpose and utilizing certain techniques such as grounding and centering, spiritual purification, and protection techniques. The orb of light exercise that I shared with you last week is a way to access more profound levels of consciousness while also being a powerful protection method. Before exploring the spirit world, it's important to strengthen and safeguard your spiritual well-being. And this is done by working with spiritual purification techniques, grounding and centering, and certain exercises such as the orb of light. As we navigate various aspects of our craft, approaching our craft with a light touch, a gentleness is beneficial. Maintaining a sense of play, wonder, enjoyment, and fun will contribute to your safety, since the most significant threats often come from within us, our own fears. In the spirit world, we may encounter a diverse range of beings. Now, there are spirits of deceit. Just like there are people that are deceitful, there are spirits that can be deceitful as well. And many of these ghosts and shades, for whatever reason, get a lot of enjoyment, it seems, out of trying to deceive people. Some people believe that there's a heaven and a hell, but I haven't experienced it being like that. There's just different levels of evolution. There are different types of nature spirits, such as land spirits, elementals, fairies, etc. And we have a whole fairy magic course that deals with fairies, so we're not going to go into that in this course. That's a very specific study. And land spirits can be the individual entities or communities of spirits that reside within specific locations. And no matter where you live, it's so beneficial to research the history of that place and find some of the indigenous peoples of that place and research who they were so that you can have a better understanding and connection to the land spirit of where you live. These are very powerful entities and can be very helpful if you learn how to respectfully interact with them. Now, elementals, such as gnomes, trolls, undines, and sylphs, are spirits of pure elemental energy. Earth elementals are often seen as gnomes or trolls. Air elementals are known as sylphs, and they are usually somewhat transparent and can be difficult to see, but they look like the Tinkerbell type of fairy frequently. Most frequently, I've seen the sylphs in incense smoke or shimmering in the air in the sunlight or the moonlight. Undines are the water elementals, and they are very similar to merfolk, like mermaids and mermen, but they can have any shape that they desire, and so can all the elementals. The fire elementals, the salamanders, maybe it's because there's a lot of fire in my chart. Most frequently of all the elementals, I tend to see the salamanders. Meditating on a campfire or on a candle flame, they immediately let themselves be known to me. They resemble little lizards made entirely of flame, show gratitude when working with all of the elementals. They are not commanded by us, but they work with us if they choose to. And building a good relationship with these elementals is done by just being a good person and practicing positive magic. This is how you attract their help. Expressing gratitude to them is another way. And sometimes you can offer them tokens of appreciation, such as burning incense or candles, leaving food or sacred waters and things like that. There's absolutely wonderful things that you can do like that. It's not that they need those physical things in order to survive, but they respond to your gesture. They respond to your gratitude. Some people believe that blowing out a candle is disrespectful to the salamanders, and so they recommend using a snuffer. However, if you don't have a candle snuffer and you don't feel like snuffing it out with your fingers, blowing gently on a candle isn't disrespectful. I respectfully disagree with that notion. Some may dismiss the idea of elementals and spirits in general. Those of us with experience know better. I would recommend that you just keep an open mind and take things one step at a time and allow the different entities that exist in the spirit world to reveal themselves to you. Let's make sure that we understand in terminology for this course the difference between evocation and invocation. For us, evocation is calling forth within a specific space, while invocation is the act of calling within in an unspecified space. So, for instance, if you're working with an elemental, you would ask them to come before you so that you can have a talk with them, just like you would call up a friend. If you were calling above you on the evolutionary scale, you would call within. So you would invoke an angel, you would invoke a deity. Whereas if you're calling forth a spirit that is at your level or beneath you, evolutionarily speaking, you would evoke them. You would call them into the space. It's not disrespectful to evoke rather than invoke. It's just understanding which type of spirit is appropriate for which type of operation. Some magical evocations, such as those found in the Lesser Key of Solomon, and the terminology used may seem intimidating for beginners because it involves working with demons. But it's important to understand that a demon is just a word that means spirit being. So anything can be a demon that's not physical. But that term demon has come to mean something else over time. And so a lot of times people, when they hear the word demon, they think in terms of a negative spirit. So it's not a word that I use a lot anymore because there's just too much confusion about it. But it's important to remember that in medieval sorcery, terminology was influenced by Christianity and the Catholic faith. The demons called forth in the Goetia are powerful. That medieval grimoire called the Goetia, the demons called forth in the Goetia are powerful. And I've witnessed some fantastic magic performed with their help. But that's not what we're covering here. Just so you understand, a lot of people will bring up the Goetia. How do I do this and how do I do that? That's not what we're covering. In the Goetia, and many like it, there's this practice of evoking spirits into a triangle of manifestation and evoking them into physical appearance. And it's something that's interesting and it's something that you can explore, but it's not something that I really do that much, other than in my course on dark magic, which is a course in shadow work. Working with this triangle of manifestation requires a lot of training and experience. And I just practice evocations with friendly spirits, that doesn't require the triangle of manifestation or any of that. When I work with friendly spirits, I work with them just like I would work with a friend. Call them up, they come over, we have a chat, we do things together, we help each other, we're respectful to each other. There's no pacts, there's no commanding them to do this or commanding them to do that. If I need help, I will ask them for help, but it's just a friendly relationship that I foster with spirits. It's nothing like in those medieval grimoires where there's a lot of commanding and threatening and compelling and imprisoning and all of that kind of stuff. It's just not my style. It's important to clarify that we are not discussing demonology in what we are calling evocation in A Witch's Primer. Some spirits have been incarnated many times and are at a high level of evolution. They have really evolved spiritually, and they've decided not to reincarnate into physical form, yet are still there to help us. These are frequently known as spirit guides or spirit mentors. They choose not to incarnate in order that they can assist people without the distractions of the physical senses. These spirit guides can provide guidance and support even to highly evolved individuals who are currently incarnate. While different terms exist for these different kinds of beings, I usually work with what I call a spirit guide, and I just work with one guide at a time. Now, you can work with many, but I have the one guide that's my inner guide, and that's who I work with. But I also work with teaching angels in my practice who have been present long before any religious beliefs, and working with the angelic energies has been very beneficial to me, regardless of its associated religious connotations. And when I call upon an angelic energy, they do respond to me. I've included a meditation with this lesson to help you find your inner guide, your spirit mentor. And it's essential to address this before we go into magic, because a spirit mentor is so helpful because they can teach you things that nobody in the physical world ever can. They can guide you in your craft, in your magic, in your spiritual development, in wisdom. And once you find your guide, it's so helpful to have regular sessions with them, to just have meetings with them. You enter into a trance state, you call upon your guide, and you just work with them. You receive information, lessons, and help. You'll learn a great deal working with your guide. Especially at first, when you're working at having a relationship with your guide needs you to use your creativity in order to do that. Especially at the initial stages, it may just seem like you're making it all up. If you ask yourself, well, what does my guide look like? What does my guide sound like? What is my guide telling me? Because you're not really making it up. You're allowing that higher intelligence that is working as your guide to work with your creative faculties to have an experience of them. If you feel like you're making the whole thing up, don't just discount it as some sort of fantastical thing that you're doing all on your own, because that's usually not the case. Another type of spirit commonly worked with in the craft is the familiar. Familiar spirits often take the form of physical pets like dogs, cats, birds, but that's not the same kind of familiar spirit that we're talking about. A familiar spirit that we're talking about is one that exists in the spirit realm. This is often called a fetch in old terminology, and we work with that in the astral projection course. It's called the light body. And you can actually develop a familiar spirit on your own to work with. And that course goes into much more depth on how to do that. But it's important to understand that there's a difference between a familiar spirit in that regard and a familiar spirit in regard to having a pet that works with you. When you familiarize a pet, that's a very advanced thing to do, because what you're doing is you're dedicating that pet solely to your work with the craft. And I don't do that. I know a lot of witches love to do that, and especially because there's so many movies and books and stories about it. When you do that, when you familiarize a pet, you have to make sure that's what they want. That's what they want. It's a lot to put on a pet. So I find that for myself, familiarizing a pet. Now, some witches say, well, it doesn't matter what they want, because just like any other beast of burden, they are mine, and I'm training them to do this, and they're going to do what I say. I've never found that it's necessary to have a familiar in that regard to to do the work that I can just do on my own or that I can do with my familiar spirit in the spirit world. So I've never put that kind of pressure on a pet, and my pets are just my pets. It's also important to understand that your familiar spirit is not the same as your guide. Your familiar spirit is something that you come up with. It's called a servitor in modern day more frequently. That's a familiar spirit. It's something that you come up with, that you program. But you can't, they're there to help you leverage your time and your energy in the craft. It can be very helpful. But it's not the same as a spirit guide. Your spirit guide or your spirit mentor is an actual entity who's more evolved than you are, that's wiser than you are, that's smarter than you are, and is here to help you. Now, another thing that you're going to encounter in the spirit world are deities, gods, and goddesses. And there are very different ways of working with deities. Many witches commonly work with an earth goddess and a horned god. It's very common. Some see the horned god as a basic earth deity, and some see the horned god as a type of solar deity, or a combination of both. I personally perceive the horned god as being the mystery of photosynthesis, or the sunlight made manifest on the earth. Some witches work with pantheons of deities, and others prefer to work without any deities at all. There's no right, there's no wrong. So you want to explore and discover what resonates with you. I have a phrase that's funny, but I like it. Deities are simply God in drag. The way infinite intelligence shows up as different perspectives, different cultures, different planetary energies, different ways of being. But I see all deities as being like a rainbow, as a refraction of one singular light. So I believe that there's one force, there's one source, and there's one substance. And all of these deities are different aspects of that one. You can, when you're working with your spirit guide, or when you're working with deities or angels, anything like that, you can ask questions out loud at your altar and simply chat with the spirits that you're working with. It's so funny because once some Christian was saying something to me about how bad the craft was and how evil it was and how Jesus doesn't like this. And I said, well, how do you know what Jesus likes? Have you talked to him about it? Why don't you just ask him? They didn't have a response to that. But you can ask questions to these entities. And it's important to note that your energy and your intentions when you're dealing with these spirits will influence not only how your interaction with the spirit goes, but also will influence the kind of spirit that you're attracting. So when you approach your altar, light your candles, and if you're using incense, you light your incense, call on your spirit guide and ask them to teach you what you need to know. A lot of times when people are working with the spirit world, they just want cool stuff to happen. They're just playing around, like with Ouija boards. I wonder what we can do. I wonder what this is going to be. And there's an innocence to that. It's not bad, but you're going to get what you put into it. So if you're approaching the spirit world from the highest perspective, wanting only the best, that's the kind of thing that you're going to get back from it. It really depends on how you approach the spirit world as to what you get back from the spirit world. Everyone has different experiences when they're asking for help from the spirit world. I've had all kinds of things happen. Books will fall off the shelf and open to a page with an answer to my question. Synchronistic events leading to connections with certain people. Omens can happen. I'll get a flash, automatic writing where it's a very detailed answer to my question. All kinds of things can happen when you're working with the spirit world. It's just you have to understand how to navigate your own interaction with that spirit world so that you are dialing your own vibration up to the level where you're attracting spirits of that same level or higher. It's super important to establish and cultivate a connection with the spirit world. This creates a foundational support so that when you're engaging in more intense magical practices, you won't feel alone. You won't feel like you're off on a tangent. You can keep coming back again and again to the most perfect thing for you in your magic and in your craft. And that's done by allowing yourself to be guided by a spirit mentor that is there for you. that spirit mentor has always been there for you. It's just that you didn't know who they were or how to meet with them. Not only that, but your spirit mentor or your spirit guide may change form, may change name according to where you happen to be. Your spirit mentor may manifest for you as a bunch of different things. Maybe you'll have a whole plethora of spirit guides because that's what's important for you at that time, because it's what you'll best relate to. Recognizing that your spirit mentor, your spirit guide that's always been with you, can manifest as any kind of thing that is most helpful for you to have that interaction with them. Now, it's important that you don't stress if you don't seem to experience something specific at first. It doesn't mean that it's not working or that nothing happened. It just means that's all you're capable at that moment of understanding or working with. And accept it. Accept whatever occurs, especially in that initial meditation. Don't worry about it. A lot of times people put so much expectation on what are they going to see, what's going to happen, that nothing really happens because your spirit mentor isn't going to ever increase your anxiety. They're never going to increase your fear level. They're going to want you to feel more peaceful and more magical and more powerful. And so at first it may be very subtle and very gentle. And over time, you foster that relationship with your spirit guide. Just accept whatever occurs during your magic or during your meditation and keep a magical diary so that you can keep track of what you see or don't see, feel or don't feel. And then as time goes on, as you look back, you'll see everything starts to make a lot of sense. In that spirit guide meditation that I offer you, if you're instructed to visualize something and you can't do it, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Just go with it. Do what you do. You may not think that you can visualize. Don't worry about it. If you're directed in that meditation to ask, what does something look like or feel like or sound like, and you feel like you want to make it up, you go ahead and make it up. Make it up. Like I said before, your spirit guide can work with your own creativity. So don't worry if you feel like you're fabricating this experience for yourself. Let yourself do that. Your spirit guide is there nonetheless. Just play with it. Enjoy it. Have fun. With everything in your craft, keeping a light touch is so necessary for powerful magic. Even on real big deal kind of magic that you might be learning as you go along, you still want to keep a light touch. You still want to have a sense of fun and play. Remember that this 18-week course is a basic introduction so that you can build your power, you can have an understanding of certain things, and that you can go upon your way, that you can have your craft. But it's your craft. It's yours. There's no witch police. Nobody's going to come and check off a certain list and make sure that you've got this right or that right. Everything is up to you. And that's why it's so helpful to start to foster this relationship with your inner guide so that you can get inspired, so that you can get directed, because your craft needs to look like your craft, not like my craft. To stay focused and avoid confusion when working with the spirit world in general, it's so helpful to have a regular practice of grounding and centering, spiritual purifications, and aura strengthening and protective measures such as the orb of light. The orb of light is such a versatile tool because it offers protection and it aids in spirit guide meditation and also in astral travel. Working with that orb of light is so helpful because it is so versatile. And once you have that kind of ingrained in your practice, you can pretty much do what you want to do. You don't have to worry about anything. This week, I want you to continue with the grounding and centering, spiritual purification, as we do every week. But I'd like for you, if you have the time, to try out that spirit guide meditation. That spirit guide meditation is just a door opener, and don't put a bunch of pressure on yourself or on the meditation to reveal something other than what is ready to be revealed to you. This is just the beginning, and little by little, over time, you will foster a wonderful relationship with that guide. And when you have the relationship with your spirit mentor, with your inner guide, all the rest of the spirit world will be so much easier to encounter because you will have guidance. You will have help. You won't need anybody else because you've got the most powerful guide for you, and that's the one that the universe itself gave you at your creation. Enjoy this week. Enjoy the Spirit Guide meditation and exploring the spirit world. And we will continue to develop your magical power next week. Thank you so much for being with me. Until next time, blessed be.